It's time for piercing battles. Entering the ring today is going to be Tragus piercings and forward helix piercings. We're going to have 5 rounds, 5 topics to decide who the winner is, and hopefully if you're trying to decide between the two of these, a basic idea of which one may work best for you and your lifestyle and etc. We're going to cover anatomy, placement, healing, jewelry choices, and living with a piercing. Coming up next on Piercing Battles, episode number 17. For those that are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Hope you find it helpful or find them helpful and useful, but you may not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So the 2 piercings we're going to talk about today are ear piercings. The Tragus piercing is done through this flap at the front of your ear right here. It's done with either a labrae stud or barbell is the correct way to do it. Usually, let's start that over again. So the 2 piercings we're going to talk about today are ear piercings. So we get to pull out the lovely silicone ear to kind of give you an idea of where they're at. The Tragus piercing is done through this kind of nub of tissue at the front of the ear canal. It is done with either a labrae stud, which is what I commonly use, or a barbell. They used to be done with rings, but I really wouldn't advise it. It ends up being a much more difficult heal. Now, the forward helix is done on the helix, this kind of flap right here, right above the ear canal, and over the antitragus, which is this right here. Now, this is done at a 90-degree angle with stud-style jewelry. Generally, what I suggest is a flat-back labrae stud or labret stud, and it can be done either, depending on the anatomy, it can be done either high or very low. So let's get into round number 1, anatomy. Now, with anatomy, when it comes to the tragus, we need something that's large enough that it's going to support the tissue or support the jewelry in the piercing. It needs to be away from the face. We shouldn't be piercing into the face. Most people do have the anatomy for this particular piercing. Occasionally we'll have one, depending on the shape, it'll be kind of M-shaped, so it's not a good candidate. But for most people, it's a piercing we can do. The forward helix. Now, first off, we do need it to be wide enough to support the jewelry and it, depending on what's behind it, an area for the jewelry to sit comfortably. This can vary from ear to ear greatly. The other thing is we need this as flat as possible, and not, as you've noted, if you kind of look at your ear or kind of feel around, you'll notice that it kind of bends outward. Like from here, it's very straight up and down, and then it kind of curves while it's the closer you get to the ear canal. We want that area in there that's as flat as possible because it's going to make for a better placement on the piercing, and it's going to be it's going to heal more easily. Also, we need to be concerned about overly pronounced anti-helix, this thing right here where we do rook piercings, that there is enough room back there for the jewelry to set comfortably. On this one, I'm going to call it a tie. So that makes the, after 1 round, Tragus piercing 1, forward helix 1. And that moves us on to the next one, placement variety. With the Tragus, the most common placement is dead center. If you do, in fact, and this is something I usually talk to people about, if you do plan on eventually wearing a ring in this, we do generally want to do it a little bit higher so that the ring sits comfortably in this kind of notch down here. But placement-wise, you can maybe, depending on how tall, I guess would be the best way to put it, we can do multiple piercings. It really depends on the shape of the tragus and how pronounced it is. It is possible for some people to do multiple. I've done up to 3 in one tragus, but it all comes around to it being wide enough and there being enough room to fit the jewelry comfortably. But you're kind of stuck with just a minimal amount of placement because there is not a lot to work with. Now, with the helix, it should be at a 90-degree angle to the flatness of this tissue. It should be in the flat area of the forward helix. But you can do it here, you can do it here, you can do it here. It really depends on how flat this area is and what's behind it and if there's space for the jewelry. That can vary greatly from person to person, but you do have a few more placement options than you would have with a tracheus piercing. And for that reason, I'm going to give this one to the forward helix, making the current total after 2 rounds, tracheus 1, forward helix 2. And that moves on to round number 3, healing. Now with healing, both of these right around 12 to 16 weeks is a good average. Sometimes they can take up to 6 months to heal. It varies from person to person. The tracheus, fairly easy heal. It's easy to isolate, doesn't really come in contact with things a lot, doesn't take a lot of extra work. Of course, you can't sleep on it. The jewelry will need to be downsized at some point. You can't. The biggest thing with this one, and I always try to bring up to people, is you cannot wear earbuds. You can't. Stethoscopes, things that go inside the ear, are going to be an issue with this piercing during the healing process, possibly afterwards. But it's really something you can't wear during the healing process. You definitely want to avoid contact with cleansers, facial cleansers, moisturizers, makeup, and of course, hair, wet or hair products during the healing process. Forward helix heals in about the same time, anywhere from usually about 12 to 16 weeks, maybe up to 6 months, varies from person to person. I have to say that this piercing, because of where it's located at, tends to have a lot more contact than the tracheus. It tends to be harder to isolate than the tracheus piercing. And it does tend to not like abuse at all. It's a little more touchy about contact of any kind. The biggest factors with this one is hair and anything that covers the ears, glasses, etc. You definitely want to keep all that stuff away from it. Glasses, you wouldn't think you have contact or much contact with, but for some reason I've had clients catch this thing on their glasses on a regular basis, so I don't know exactly what they're doing. Also, headbands, hats, helmets, etc. Definitely don't want to have contact with those. You want to avoid contact with wet hair. You want to wear it up during the until it's dry. Same thing with the tracheus. You also, I think with the ear, the people that put the hair behind their ears, they tend to kind of drag it over the piercing, so that can cause a little bit more contact, more so than the tracheus. The other thing is you want to make sure that you keep hair products away from the area while it's healing. It's just a much more complicated and much more of a commitment and more prone to trauma than the tracheus. So I'm going to give that one to the tracheus. So after 3 rounds, we're going to tie it up at 2 each, going into round number 4. Round number 4, jewelry choices. With tracheus piercings, you can wear flat-back libre studs, barbells, or you can wear rings. So it gives it a little bit more variety. And when it comes to the libre studs and etc., with like threadless and threaded, there is a lot of different options out there for you. You can do a lot of interesting things with this piercing. Forward helix. I don't really suggest rings in this, but it is possible. You just want to make sure they're well seasoned. The same thing with the tracheus. I guess I should have said that you want to wait until it is completely seasoned before you try to put circular jewelry in it. However, you're pretty much limited to flat-back libre studs. Barbells don't usually work very well in this area because of what's behind it. You want to kind of avoid contact with the things that are below it or behind it during the healing process and afterwards. There's a lot of options on ends, so that you're not very limited, but you're kind of limited to just that style. Rings, some people swear by them, but they do take up a lot of space, and they're going to get a lot of contact. And because this area tends to come in contact with hair a lot, it's more prone to getting caught than a libre stud or something that's more flat and has a lower profile. You're also kind of limited on large gym settings. I really wouldn't suggest putting something very big here because you can't really fit it into the area. They look good. I've done it before and we tried it out, but they tend to be a little more touchy as far as getting caught on things. A little bit more acceptable to it. So that round, I'm going to give you tracheus piercings. After 3 rounds, it's tracheus 3, forward helix 2. Now let's start on to round number 5, living with the piercing, the final round. Tragus piercings, fairly easy to isolate. I would say between the two of them, they are a lot easier, mainly because of where they're located in this mid area. It doesn't seem to get as much contact as the forward helix. You may not be able to wear earbuds or have things inside your ear canal. That's something, usually with flatback LeBray studs is not an issue, but super large pieces, things may not feel very comfortable. Even a heel piercing or a heel piercing will kind of flare up after you wear them for too long. So that's something to take into account. You may or may not be able to sleep on the piercing, especially during the healing process, but possibly even afterwards without noticing discomfort the next day until it's well seasoned. And if you have threaded ends, you're going to need to check the ends on a regular basis to make sure they're secure. Forward helix, a little bit more difficult to isolate, as I've mentioned throughout this video. Even after it heals, you need to be very cautious on contact with the piercing, especially hair. Hair tends to kind of want to be there. It's like one of the things I complain about the most while I'm doing the piercing is your hair is getting in the way and all this. And I've tried everything to keep it out of the way, including, putting drapes with the peephole thing that's supposed to keep hair out of the way. Anyway, so it's a little bit more, you need to baby the area and keep things away from it even after it heals. This one can reject if it gets snagged or torn. It's a little bit more touchy than the Tragus. You may not be able to sleep on the piercings even after the piercings have healed. That's really common with any type of ear piercing. Usually if you sleep on it and you're a little rough, the next day you might have some discomfort. They are prone, as I mentioned, to any issue involving trauma. You really have to baby the area even after the piercing is healed. Just like with a Tragus, if you have threaded ends, you do need to check them on a regular basis. So based on just the fact that it's harder to isolate and is a little bit more prone to issues from trauma even after the piercing is healed, I'm going to give the forward helixes. I'm going to give this one to the Tragus. It's just an easier piercing to kind of deal with. It's a much easier heal in a lot of ways. Easier to maintain and has less problems when it gets bumped around a little bit. It's a little bit more durable, I guess would be a good name for it, or a good way of describing it. So after 5 rounds, it is going to be Tragus 4, forward helix 2. Hope this is helpful in some way, shape, or form. I think the biggest thing between the two of these is Tragus, a little bit easier to heal. Forward helix is a little bit more of a commitment, especially when it comes down to doing multiple forward helixes. The common thing is to do 3 of them. You're going to have 3 times the issues, and the higher you go up, the more traumatic they tend to be. So keep that in mind when you're deciding how in your piercing choices. Does this help in any way? I don't know. Does it really mean that Tragus is a superior piercing? It's all about helping you choose what's going to work best for you and your lifestyle. Do you have either of these piercings? What was your experience like having them, getting them done, etc.? Please leave a comment. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I'd love to see you for your piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in that next video.